Good morning, everyone. To my brother Bishop, His Lordship Barbara, to our Senator, and to all the leaders of this institute, Hakima, and the institutes that have assisted us, to all of you, leaders of various levels, legislators, politicians, persons involved in various sectors of government, and for all of us who are committed to justice as a major aspect of our mission as church in justice and peace throughout our nation. I greet you all, and I'm very honored to be given this opportunity, brief, to make some remarks and to talk to the survey that has been presented to us on citizenry participation in the devolved government and in general in all sectors of government. I know a lot was said yesterday, so I most probably will repeat some things that were said yesterday. I'll try to be brief because for sure they were talking to the same ideas that most probably I will present today. As a point of context, the Constitution had a very clear idea about devolved government, and it presented it very clearly, and I'm sure you did look at it yesterday on Article 174. But I won't look at it, and I'm not a lawyer by profession, therefore I would do injustice to talking law. But I wanted to just highlight why this survey was very crucial and why I found it relevant. Because the aims and objectives of devolved government were all listed in this article. But I wanted to highlight maybe three in particular that most probably this survey tries to talk to. The first, surprise, that the devolved government, the objectives of the devolution of government are to devolve democratic and accountable exercise of power. The accountable is maybe the word to look, and I'm sure you've talked to it. But the second one is also interesting, to foster national unity by recognizing diversity. Too much attention is placed to diversity and not enough to national unity. In other words, it's not to highlight diversities in order to fragment the national feelings and spirit. These are the issues that I felt the survey was trying to talk to. And the third one, of course, which is a key, to give powers of self-governance to the people and enhance the participation of the people in the exercise of powers of state and in making decisions affecting them. These 3 points, there's a whole list, as you all know, are what I found very relevant in the opportune moment to ask those questions. The Constitution places this as the objectives. Are they being reached? Are there systems that are facilitating it? What can we do to oil this system? And it is not just a political issue, because it's a social issue. It addresses the welfare of the persons. It addresses what we are going to build. And therefore, the focus, as also the survey puts, has been too much on funds. Of course, funds is always at the best of everything we do. But it has to be, are we addressing the holistic person in terms of his or her holistic needs, such that in this situation, they're able to participate in their holistic well-being and demands and services, besides what may be just directly development. Politics and ways of government always have social growth as their objective, And the differences about how to bring it about is what differentiates philosophies of politics or political parties of direction. But at all times, what we must seek is a sum total of expected good gains in the persons making up society, in their interrelationship, such that as well we're able to uplift the societal environment, and that whole sum total, as we always speak to it, is a common good. Too often, we are looking at finances, and what I would want to bring out as the questions and concerns, especially that were addressing the environmental issues of resolution, of conflicts, of reconciliation, of baggage that the people keep carrying, should be addressed not necessarily financially, but in order to make this devolved government achieve its goals, there is a need of addressing it in an aspect of environment, that is awareness, that is talking, that is improving, that is somehow stimulating amongst our people the desire to have an open mind in order to address this, what we call the common good. So, in my view, that what we have many times have to look as our marking scheme in terms of the achievement of goals should be evaluation, the monitoring, and even the final judgment we make on the decisions and on the advancements that we make should be based on common good. I was very pleased in the survey to note that there were many questions that were addressing the issues ethical. There were things about how do you reflect back? How do you make the participation of the citizenry not only be in terms of giving a voice, but also in monitoring, making a judgment of whether a judgment call, right or wrong, on the direction that the government, be it county, be it national, are taking. And this citizenly participation has many setbacks and hurdles which have been addressed. I wish just to maybe highlight those that caught my attention and maybe put it in my own words. Unfortunately, I have a baggage that is before I used to practice engineering. And it always finds its way in some of the things I speak. You see, engineering is a very good science because it has several things. First, design. You look at a very beautiful conceptual design of what you want to do. And you actually do the design of how it's going to stand with all the structural elements. That you then sell to the people, and whenever you bring those models, everyone says, oh, how beautiful. That is a model. It's not the real thing. Then you have a second stage that is called implementation, where you get some characters called contractors. Those gentlemen and ladies, because there are ladies there too, are sometimes very difficult persons, because that is where the system starts to lose problems, to lose its focus. And as they start implementing, the way of implementing, they start shifting things, and at times you're not able as an engineer even to supervise and make sure that they actually keep with what was the design. And finally, you have those houses that fall down. The first culprit is the engineer, not the contractor. They say, oh, why is the engineer? But most times, the flaw can be in design or in implementation in the construction. Same applies to a society. And here, I want to just, as I say, highlight my views that we must address 2 points. when we are speaking about the public and citizenly participation. One is a desired participation, that concept that we've just read from the Constitution. The second is the system's capacity to execute and implement that idea. And I think those are part of the questions that were brought in the survey. Are we capable of actually implementing in a just way and in an effective way that execution of the desired ends? In my view, that second part of execution needs to be addressed, and addressed seriously. I'm sure that doesn't say I'm ending, but if it says I will give thanks and sit down, I hope it's not a fire, but there must be some opposition somewhere who is pressing against us. You always have to blame someone else, not yourself. Someone somewhere is against us. Let's go back. What I was trying to say is that an uncoordinated, disorderly implementation risks total failure. In my view, the engagement of the public in the context of community is this feedback loop that is meant to be a process of assessing and checking the public governance policies and decisions against this marking scheme, common good, and as well marking about not only the desired design, but also the implementation capacity. Unfortunately, public assessments, when we have seen, have been viewed as in the historical context, and this comes out very strongly in the survey, of settling scores. Settling scores. I also add another not very good word, visceral reactions, not rational reactions. When we go to public and we start examining, we let ourselves be easily swayed into that. And the first culprit of this is ethnicity, which comes out very clearly. Even when assessing issues, we find ourselves prisoners of this ethnic bias. And ethnic affinity is not only a bias, we get a certain affinity. I like this guy even before he speaks. I'm sure that affinity is very human too. We shouldn't think that we are going to reach a situation of total purity. Because when you see someone who comes in front and says he looks good, you already like what he was going to say. If he looks scruffy, you don't like it. It's human. But I think the deeper problem is that this is a virus. It's not just our general disposition. And therefore, there comes out this idea of, in assessing, defending the so-called our people in this issue. So the people who are governing, or even the people who he is one of us as a society of a place. So our policy opinions easily degenerate into tribal platforms, even when perhaps they have a positive point. You may have a very, very strong point, but when it degenerates to a tribal platform, it easily loses. So at times even we sense this even in our county governance. And that was a question that was presented to us about the county that may be overwhelmingly on one side or the other, that as well we find some kind of ethnicized legislation, meaning legislation house, whichever it be. And this is something that I think, ladies and gentlemen, we must address, because it's not about education, because those are generally our educated people. The second culprit in my thinking, which also comes out, is what I've just presented, the feeling of being a victim of misfortune. instigated by the other sector, like the ones who are ringing the bell, you feel, I am a victim. And therefore, the next opportunity I have, I must try to settle a score. And even if I'm not settling a score, I must be happy that they endure the same that I endured. And this is where reconciliation comes in. The sense of shedding baggage. And I feel justice becomes a culprit of these two enemies, ethnicity and the sense of victimization and vengeance. We as Christians must face these two things. Unfortunately, sometimes this reconciliation, which is very, very, very important, is being addressed politically. But reconciliation and bring the people together must be addressed on a personal platform of belief, because that's why you get the person more entirely. Politics and political feelings are normally something we wear on top, not something that comes from under. And the best way to see it is that how we shift political convictions every time election comes around. Really, we don't believe in the political manifesto as we shift. So there is something deeper which has to be addressed. And I think that came out quite well. How to do it? That's our challenge. But I feel we have the tools, the experience, and even case studies that can bring this very well. The case in point that I wanted just to refer in person is, for example, the case that the Catholic Diocese of Eldoret has done. It is a case that comes from the grassroots. It's not imposed from above. It is not a political reconciliation. How do we address it at the national level? How do we address it in the schools and education institutions where these two characters are still fighting? How do we engage it within our own community and, of course, in the devolved government? I know time is not on my side. I highlight 3 points. In the attempt to bring about this public audit, make it more effective, make it more realistic, bring about this national unity while respecting diversity, bring about the sense of transparency and accountability, we have 3 hurdles that must be addressed that come in many ways in this survey. And it is up to us to give it legs. The first, I call them the 3 C's. I put them: community priorities, capacity, and corruption. I'm sure I'm mentioning nothing new than what was said yesterday. Capacity is necessary. But capacity means involvement of the community at the national, party, county, and local levels to identify priorities. There must be a marking scheme that they must be involved in priority identification and therefore be there to account for it. But we must therefore give facility for these priorities to be set such that the public forums where we engage these politicians, where we engage the community, is not distorted by the politicians. Most public hearings are poorly mobilized in the wrong days, and sometimes engage in the kind of people who are not going to really engage in the questions. And that is done not necessarily by mistake, by plan. You hold a Catholic gathering, a public gathering, at a time, 9 a.m., on a day, Wednesday, you'll be sure that the working class will rarely have a great representation. You get all the people of the ones who are the local, but we have to see how do we engage it in a way that we facilitate in that county or in that moment that those persons engaged can be present. Manipulation of public hearings, we know, is a danger. I jump to the next. The second one is capacity. And here I want to mention 2 things. capacity of the public to engage because they have a good grasp of issues, and capacity of the executive organs to properly execute the desired programs. The contractor capacity, if I won't put it in engineering. Does this man have the equipment? Does this man know how to build? Does he, given the analogy of engineering? And the capacity to actually engage and own to what are the ideals. The survey presented here was mainly carried out among the educated. And yet the majority in our people in our nation who are engaged in politics, politically engaged, even those who vote, even those who meet in those barazas, are generally the lower, medium educated and the lower. So there is a disconnect. And although this survey brings, I put that as an issue to be addressed, that most times the capacity of the public we want to engage, intellectual, is wanting. And we have to make the awareness. Call it political literacy, call it literacy about social issues. That is where we must as well address, because it's not enough to have that cream who only talk but are not there in the engagement of the politics or the political decisions. The second, as I was saying, is the capacity of this very same executive, that means the county governance, to implement. This has not been questioned enough, in my view. There's a long wish list of desired objectives, but our system is normally inefficient and often compromised by lack of expertise. Huge funds need persons at all levels to understand, safeguard the application of these funds for the desired objective. And the persons overseeing these objectives must have the intellectual capacity or grasp or expertise, knowing how to correlate the intended results and in the process of implementation. It's not only about funding, it's about planning, it's about priorities, it's about, is that bringing about that desired common good? And before concluding, the last one, which to me is a very serious issue, corruption. This is a real issue. On one hand, in the culture of corruption among our leaders and of our executive systems. And on the other, no less important, the gullibility of our people to be easily corrupted, to be silenced by little goodies, to close their eyes provided they too share in the eating. This is a combination that is fatal for whatever we're trying to do in the devolved governance, in the devolved system, in the devolved services. No matter how good our policies look, no matter how rosy the results seem, no matter how much finances we adjudicate or we appoint or allocate, while this process does not, even when we have good capacity, if this process does not address the issue of corruption, so long as that issue continues being rogue, no progress will be made. And this must be addressed at those levels of leadership, of systems, and citizenry. What we call the matatu culture. The matatu culture means anything goes. And after all, the law is relative. Shift goalposts with some coins. And that is really the system that can destroy all these rosy and good ideas that we have. It's unfortunate that this is not addressed enough. It's unfortunate that it's not been addressed at the county when addressing the devolution issue from either the government or the opposition. I conclude with the example again of engineering, and you forgive this. It's like water. When you design a dam, you design a wonderful dam, huge, huge dam with a lot of water. And then you design a water distribution system, network. And we can have a great dam, a water system that is intent on distributing to so many of the communities. But when that dam starts to leak, And when that pipe network starts to leak, that leak always becomes bigger. It never stops unless it's stopped. The leak will force its way more and more, and you will not be able to know how much of that water will reach to who. It's a system that in itself continues in a way crippling itself towards the end. My challenge, therefore, as I very much laud the survey, is to say the two issues I would like to highlight were, on one hand, the sense of reconciliation not at a political level, but at a personal level, at the level we engaged as church too and as human persons in order to make this real. And the second, that corruption, the third C, must be addressed, because no matter how well we design our dams and funds that we keep, no matter how well we think the distribution of that will be good, however big pipes, if the system continues leaking, two things will happen. It will destroy the very same dam that you built, it will collapse, and it will destroy the same people downstream that you wanted to supply the water with. In other words, if we don't address it, it is the same people we are trying to participate and to benefit in the common good that are going to be the first victims. With these few reflections, not anything new, but just highlighting 2 or 3 things that this survey brought in my own words. I say this public scrutiny that we are speaking about, the public participation, is about these dreaded checks and balances. The vetting process we saw is a question to ask. Yes, public participated, but did they make a mark? Was there any person held back because of the public voice presented? That's the system we must oil. God bless you. Thank you.